I'm Julie Legg, author of The Missing Piece and diagnosed with ADHD at 52.
And I'm Gel Legg, diagnosed at 55.
Welcome to ADHD Difference. In this episode, we'll be chatting about dopamine stacking. Dopamine, as we know, it's a neurotransmitter that transfers information between cells, and it's complex, but really it's about keeping motivated, and it's a bit of a pleasure hormone as well. So that's the dopamine side of things. And stacking is when we pile one lot of dopamine on top of another, And so it has an interesting effect, and we're going to be talking about dopamine stacking, the upsides and the downsides of it. I guess what can happen is when you pile dopamine on top of it, and I'm meaning things like an energy drink while watching a movie, while scrolling through your phone. Individually, they create dopamine, but pile them on top of each other, and it can feel wonderful. However, the downside is that you can actually have a crash as well. Or you might not appreciate what you're doing because you're multitasking your dopamine, if that makes sense, and the effect isn't quite the same.
It's a bit sort of like dopamine gluttony, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Eating too much all at the same time, and then wondering why you feel a bit rubbish at the end, a bit sick or full. So yeah, we kind of think about dopamine stacking. Sometimes we probably do it on purpose. Perhaps the need for dopamine is so big. Perhaps think about it like eating a meal. We're so hungry, we stuff all this food down really fast without waiting for it to... I think it's about 20 minutes when the food hits your stomach and your brain gets the message that, yeah, I'm doing good, this is fine. And so in those 20 minutes, you stuff so much food down that, you're now stuffed. But with dopamine, perhaps we're trying to get it so fast, we stack all these things on top of each other. The big thing, my understanding of this, is that we then crash and burn. And we crash and burn quite hard. So again, there's that similarity with eating too much. You know, it's not a good thing, is it?
Yeah.
Whereas if we just take everything slowly and do things with a bit more forethought, we can still reach those dopamine levels. We can spread it over a long period of time. We don't run the risk of, the analogy you can imagine.
Yeah. It's interesting, I think, too, because, with ADHD, maybe some of that regulation is not quite there, that moderation. And so whether we're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, often it's only until we really understand our brains and why we do what we do that it kind of makes sense. But there's lots of occasions where we'd have the highest of high days, just absolutely an amazing day. Retrospectively, it was jam-packed of so much dopamine all on top of each other. It was going to be a success for that moment. And then the next day, I'm thinking about socializing.
Yeah.
The next day, it can just be really quite bland. This crash, almost an overwhelm of too much dopamine.
Yeah, I mean, we'll try and go through some examples where it can be socially or in work or in a family environment. We've been thinking about lots of different environments where this can happen. So correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, but are we more likely to stack dopamine and then run into a brick wall if we're unmedicated?
Interesting. I think neither of us are medicated. My understanding is ADHD stimulant medication brings up those dopamine levels to neurotypical levels. And so that craving or desire to seek dopamine is leveled out. So then probably not craving as much dopamine because they're quite satisfied already. I would say more unmedicated.
Yeah, so pre-diagnosed or post-diagnosed and for whatever reason not wanting to or can't for various medical reasons take medication. So yeah, you mentioned socializing. We don't socialize a great deal all the time, and a great deal very often. And for a long time, we've worked out we've spoken before about socializing we dislike and avoid. Going to a family barbecue. No, boring situations, things we struggle with. Just going for dinner with some people, I think, would be quite boring. So there'd have to be people we do socialize with have to have lots of energy, and we can go out and socialize without drinking. And I'm particularly I've always been very good at going out and not drinking if I'm driving, because I just don't drink and drive. And so, yeah, I've got no problem with that. But it has to be something really exciting, something really enjoyable. If it's something that really suits us, whether we're hosting or going out, and particularly if we're hosting, we can have a drink. We will stack. We will have a drink, we'll have some nice food, we'll have some great conversation, lots of energy, and we will stack. We will chuck everything into that and be the best hosts, and mainly, I think, put forward all of our best energy and all our most positivity and give it our all. And that can last for a few hours. And then the next day, if that was a fantastic social, a real buzz, we don't ride on it the next day. We don't think, yeah, we should do this more often. It's really good. We are absolutely stuffed.
Exhausted.
Yeah. And yeah, the next day's just not a write-off, but it's sort of, it doesn't carry through. Yeah, whereas we could, if we end up in a social situation which is not of our choosing, which is a lot less energetic and doesn't stack, and we don't layer all those things, then we'll come home and carry on and do something. Or the next day, life just carries on. So a small example there.
Yeah, and I think with this dopamine stacking, from how I understand it, is that by stacking more on top of more on top of more, you're actually not really engaging with any particular thing well, if you know what I mean. So it might feel really good. Let's say you're going for a run and you've got your favourite music in your ears. Are you listening to the music as well as you could, or are you enjoying the sensation of running as much as you could? It's a blast. You finish the run, but and you may feel great, but the next time you do it, that level of satisfaction might not be there. It needs to be louder music, or the run wasn't feeling as, rewarding as it previously did, which kind of is the pattern of some addictive type behaviours. And I'm not saying that dopamine is addictive. I'm not saying that. But you do too much of a good thing, and there will be some ramifications, and including impulsivity. And, when you're feeling on this high on life and you're loving everything, you're more likely to struggle maybe moderating some of those impulsive type behaviours.
Excuse me. Another example I'm thinking of is work. My work approach and relationship to work has changed a lot over it's been about 22 years now since I've been in someone else's environment. I've been working for myself 22 years, predominantly as a web developer, and always from home. I never had offices. So I would suggest a way I used to stack was I would get more and more work. I'd get a dopamine hit from having my own business, because the more orders you get, the more work you get, the more successful you are, the less chances you have to go back and work with other people in another environment. So it was a great motivator. So having a successful business is great. So that will give you a huge dopamine hit just knowing that you're valued and wanted. So there'll be 10, 15 websites stacked up and lots of small projects, and that meant 14-hour days for me, and sometimes 7 days a week, and quite often actually. But I would want to do everything else too. So for example, when working, I would have the news feeding. I'm a bit of a news hound, so the TV would be on with the news playing all day long. So I'm getting the hit of keeping up with current events, particularly some big ones that happened over the last 20 years. So there's two things going on there. Then on top of that, I'd eat at the desk. So all the meals I had there, there's a natural dopamine hit that comes from having a meal. As it went into the evening, then I think, okay, so the day's over, there's no more phone calls or clients, out comes the bottle of wine. So there's dopamine hit with the wine whilst keeping working. I just rewinded back into the day for a long time. My son would be at home, and working from home was great because I could be with my son. And so my son would have a computer set up next to him, and he'd have the CD-ROMs, and it'd be, just a great age where he was learning and playing on the games. And so I was parenting. You've got all these things going on, stacking, each one which, as far as I'm concerned, were giving me a dopamine hit. I almost didn't crash because I never had time to stop. But when I slept like a log and would get up late because I'd be up to 2 a.m. working. And it was just on and on and on. The crash, I was in my 40s, late 30s. So not the age I am now. So my body was more resilient to these things. But over time, it was a slow motion car crash because eventually your health declines. It really does. Putting on weight and just not having the energy, and that you're doing bad things to your body. So I think that was a form of stacking, but in my case, it was going on for actually years.
Yeah, and that kind of behaviour definitely would lead to this burnout, the adrenaline that you just can't keep up forever. At some point, that's going to come tumbling down, isn't it?
I remember there would be days where I just go and couldn't move at all. And suddenly you hit a brick wall and you go and lie in the bed in the middle of the day for 2 hours and you couldn't move. And I would get told off, why are you lying there doing nothing? Because I can't move. I just crashed, and burned. But the big crash and burn, which luckily I never reached, unfortunately for those of us sort of a bit older, is serious medical conditions. If I hadn't have turned that around, some very bad things would have happened. Eventually it will catch up with you.
So just like anything, the flip side, the upside of dopamine stacking is that at the time you can be really productive. You can work all those hours. Things are great on a working basis. On a social basis, you're on an absolute social high. You're loving every minute. So there is an upside to it. But the downsides aren't particularly pleasant. So I guess we come down to, given that ADHDers, particularly unmedicated, will crave this and seek dopamine top-ups just to usual levels, that's going to continue. What do we do to avoid, what can we do to avoid dopamine stacking?
Okay, so back to that example, so okay, so you're hungry. I like this this sort of simile with eating. So you're hungry, you want food, so bam, bam, bam. But I learned a long time ago that there's an old-fashioned way of eating, and that's chew everything X number of times and eat it slowly. Just giving your stomach that chance to say, "Hey, I've had enough." It's so simple, and it's such an old, well-known thing, and it's been around forever, and it works. And so what I try to do now with dopamine is try not to stack it all on top and get the dopamine from each thing. Part of that is, I suppose, being a little bit wiser and older, is understanding that dopamine may not be instant. For instance, if I have a job to do in the day, it may not, the result may not come straight away, but just take it bit by bit. And so the dopamine's coming, just wait for it. Right, so there's the thing that'll take all day. Some jobs might take all week. But along the way, what I do now is, instead of having the television on, I got lots of little, nature of my work is there's lots of little moments that might last 30 seconds or 2 minutes when something's happening or uploading that I can't do anything while I'm waiting for that to happen. So boom, I go straight to a news headline, check in, has anything changed? Has the world blown up? No, great, back to the work. So it's not stacking one on top of the other. It's sort of like going in and out of different things, but controlling. Yeah. So I feel like I'm in touch with the world and still getting my news hit. It could be I go and watch a music video if it's something I'm waiting for if I'm waiting for a video I'm rendering and it's going to take 5 minutes, I can't do anything else. So I'll go and do something to give me a dopamine hit.
So to me, that sounds like you're doing it intuitively.
Yeah.
It's not like, I must plan this. But if you have to plan it, that's absolutely okay too. So you're rolling with your dopamine rather than stacking it.
Yes.
It's intermittent. Some are going to be delayed dopamine rewards, and others are instant. But you kind of cruise along and get your little dopamine here and dopamine there. That's awesome.
And I do think if you're working in an environment where you're in someone else's office and you're an employee in that space, and I would sort of reach out to managers and bosses who have people like us with ADHD in that space. Okay, so I've always taken this view that any other person of a similar skill set to me should take as long as I take to achieve a job of a certain quality. And so if it takes me 8 hours to do something, someone else reasonable should take 8 hours too. If they take 4, wow. If they take 12, a bit slow. So if that employee, the person sits there and they work away for half an hour, maybe pushing 40 minutes, which funnily enough is about how long a classroom is. They worked this out a long time ago. Kids can't concentrate for more than about 40 minutes. There's a reason classes don't last 2 hours. And then they disappear and you come in, keep catching them on a YouTube video or checking their Facebook or their social media. You've got to look at their output at the end of the day, because the person with ADHD can be just as efficient even if they appear to always be doing something else. And then they get in trouble and then they get put down as always catching them slacking. No, look at the output.
Yes.
Now, there's a reason I say this, is because when my entire life circumstances changed and we ended up together, Jules was fantastic. She was aware I was working 14-hour days, but it was very clear when she left to go to an office at 8 in the morning, the working day started. She'd be home at about 4:30, and it was very clear that I was to stop work then, because then, and there would be no working on the weekend. And I thought, this is impossible. The amount of work I have, I cannot do this. It won't work. But actually what happened was I just got more efficient, and I got a dopamine hit from achieving as much as I could in that time. It took a little while to adjust to, but in time, my business earned just as much money. I had to get more efficient and concentrate more, because all this stacking, I thought I was being Mr. Superhero, fitting all this stuff in, but I wasn't. Perhaps the crash and burn was happening within it because I was not being nearly as efficient. Yeah, it didn't mean my customers got ripped off, because they were only paying me a certain amount of money, which any reasonable person would charge. So if they were paying me for what a reasonable person take 4 hours to do a job, and it took me 8 or 12 because I was stacking all these things and not really, well, they didn't lose out. I was the one losing out because I was not really enjoying each thing properly.
Yeah.
Compartmentalize, here's the job, concentrate as much as you can, short breaks, get it done, now move on. Now it's the evening time. Now you can fully enjoy watching a film or reading a book or going for a walk. Yeah.
So I think dopamine stacking, what to do about it, you've got to work it out yourself, to be honest. There's lots of suggestions out there and some strategies, and you've got to pick the one that works for you. But definitely avoiding this yo-yoing, just like anything, whether it's exercise or indulgence of anything particularly. Try and avoid the yo-yoing. Try and set yourself on a scale that's achievable, on a path that's doable. And if you need a reminder, it's been said to set yourself reminders literally on a timer if you feel that you're working for too long straight without a break, and then so put a timer on so you can have a break every hour or every 35 minutes or whatever it works out to be, and do something that just can release some dopamine there and then, some instant dopamine. Then you've got this,
I keep coming back to this idea of, for me, maybe it's just me, but I keep coming back to this idea that dopamine, for me in my brain, feels like hunger for food. So at the end of any given day, I need to have had a certain amount of dopamine, and I have to get it because my brain isn't always producing enough of it. So it's a bit like at the end of the given day, I need to have eaten a certain amount of food. And there are going to be times when I'm hungry and I feel like I need, which is like needing dopamine, but that's what the snacks are for. Taking that little snack tides you over sometimes too. So I'm stuck at work for a whole afternoon, but tonight I'm going to go and have a game of squash with someone, and that's a real dopamine hit, lots of energy and so on. Yeah.
I've just thought, instead of dopamine stacking, it should be dopamine snacking.
Snacking, yeah.
Yeah. I claim that one.
Well done. So yeah, you get through the day snacking. If it's another 4 hours watching the clock before you can go and have that game of squash, and find something. And hopefully you're in an environment where you can just take out 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes to do something. And that may include just sort of getting out of your seat off the office and going for a quick black round the block. But I'm really appealing to managers here to understand that this is what we need to do. And sometimes I think doing things one thing after another, small snacks, is better than necessarily than saying, hey, okay, employee, there's no way I'm going to let you go take a 5-minute hike round the block and come back ready to get back into work. But I'll let you sit there with your headphones on, listening to music while you're working, which is stacking, possibly. Yeah, and having a coffee, stacking. Because as long as you're sat in that seat, I know you're being productive.
I know, that's crazy, isn't it?
I do think this stacking, especially in the work environment, has got a lot to do with productivity. And you really shouldn't care what someone is up to or doing. This is what the diversity thing is. It doesn't matter how they approach their work, provided they still produce what your business needs at the end of a measurable period of time. And yeah, I've worked with a lot of people that have some very strange approaches to how they work, but they were very valued. Because they were just great engineers and they produced what the company needed, and we were all different. It's almost like I'm talking a long time ago here, over 20 years ago. I worked in an environment before the word diversity was even used or invented, because engineers, I'm talking software engineers, electronic engineers, we're a very strange bunch. We're all we really are. And I can speak from working across a lot of companies around the world. We are an odd bunch. And we always had so very diverse ways of working on a 24-hour clock with all sorts of strange environments. But it was almost just accepted as normal. I don't think any of us have survived 5 seconds in other businesses.
One last thought on dopamine snacking, and that is, I think we need to be realistic about what drives our urge for dopamine, and it is things of interest, and generally that can be things that are new, because new things are more exciting than routine old things. And so don't be surprised if once upon a time you had so much joy and got a great dopamine ticket from listening to your favourite song, and then a month later that doesn't do it for you. That's okay. You haven't lost your way. Maybe you just need to do something new. Find a new song or a new hobby or something. So don't be surprised if it wanes after a period of time. That's just natural for us.
Yeah. It's interesting, this stacking thing. I know it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, and when you look back on your life, you realise that there are times or habits or spaces where you got into the whole stacking thing. And I don't know whether as you get older, you naturally move into a space where you just work out what works better for yourself. But I do think, thinking about stacking, I think it's something I'm more likely to have always done when I had a lot more energy, perhaps, or more ambition, because ambition is a precursor for really going for dopamine, isn't it? So if you have no ambition, that's a whole chunk where you're not going to get the dopamine hit. If you're just happy to, and there's nothing wrong with this, but some people are quite happy just go, not have ambition and plod through the day and move forward. But as human creatures, we all have something that we really look forward to enjoying or doing. There was another one we were going to mention, which may be more relevant, and it may be more relevant for someone listening in their 20s or 30s, is going on holiday. So, holidays are a great time of letting yourself loose, aren't they? Especially if you've got a really boring work routine. Excuse me. So, you got two kind of, in my view, there's two approaches to a holiday. There's the idea of going and spending a week on a beach, Vanuatu or Spain or something, or wherever. That sounds glorious when you're in New Zealand, but let's say Vanuatu, someone local, Fiji, which is, or whatever. That's our backyard almost in terms of holidays. So you spend a week on a beach, just sunbathing, maybe pick a book up. Or you spend a week on a super adventure holiday, where you cram everything in. And we don't do the beach holidays. No. Last adventure one we did, I think we did the UK in 10 days. And we're talking Ireland, not Ireland, we didn't do it. It was Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, London, Southeast, all over in 10 days. And that was stacking. That really was, because you're visiting everything, you're seeing everything, you're eating every different kind of food you can find, you're drinking at every opportunity, So you can't come back from a stacked holiday like that
and feel
relaxed. That's the whole thing. You go to, how was your holiday? I'm knackered, I need a holiday. Well, that's a stacked holiday, really. And I'm not saying only ADHD people do that. Other people do as well, but we're very much likely to do that.
So, thank you for listening. This has all been about dopamine stacking, and as it turns out, dopamine snacking as well. Thank you for listening.